Welcome to the Women in Industry podcast. My name is Kirsty Davies-Chinnock, and today I'm joined by Dr Pam Murrell. Pam is the CEO of the Cast Metals Federation, and the Cast Metals Federation works to foster development, collaboration and innovation in the UK casting industry, and they look to promote good practice, and they do represent the best of British casting across the globe. So, hello, Pam. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, nice to be here.
It's wonderful to have you on the podcast because I've known you for a while. But I didn't know that you did your first degree in metallurgy and material sciences at Cardiff and then your PhD at Cranfield in metallurgy. You've always spent your life around metal. I've got to ask, why metal?
Good question, I suppose. I suppose at school I did. I liked the sciences. I did chemistry and physics at to GCSE level, and then carried on to do A levels in maths and physics, but also French. And then I suppose when I was coming to look at what I was going to do next, going to university was always something that I thought I would enjoy. I mean, this was back in the day when we had grants and all that sort of thing. So it was very enjoyable to go, and I went away from home. And I thought probably engineering wasn't an option because of the maths, really. I mean, I went to an ordinary comprehensive school. Some people did very well, but it was unusual really to get really strong maths results at the school. So really engineering would have been a bit difficult. I'd probably had to do a foundation year or something. But actually metallurgy, material science, I liked the fact that materials were so important. And actually there was always a bit of a story around materials. It wasn't just crunching numbers. It was, it was understanding how they work. There was a story around them really about the processing and the use. When I went to Cardiff, and I was lucky to get into Cardiff University, and they had a metallurgy and material science degree. And the beauty of that was that you did a common first year, and metallurgy and material science was just one option, and I did physics, and I had to do slightly misnamed. I had to do special chemistry because I hadn't got a chemistry A level, which felt a bit like a punishment, really, given that it was on a Friday afternoon in a sort of black box on the campus. And you didn't finish till 5 o'clock in the afternoon on the practicals, and then you wanted to go away for the weekend. It was all quite tough, actually. But anyway, but that was necessary.
Putting into your drinking time as well.
Especially as a student, and if you wanted to go away, it was just not great, really. But anyway, and I'm not sure I really understood what we were doing in the chemistry, because we were supported by other PhD students who were just there because they were being paid £15 an hour, frankly, to be there, So, but anyway, we survived. It was all fine. But obviously, being at Cardiff, the focus was very much on steels.
Yeah.
And when it came to the end of the first year, I didn't have particularly strong A levels, but really thrived in the degree. It was a very small group as well. We only had 9 of us on the course, and only 2 of them were young women like myself. But actually, it was a really nice feel. The lectures were really nice, and I certainly didn't want to do straight physics, so I opted for metallurgy. And I say the focus was really around the steel industry. You can imagine, being in South Wales, the steel sector was preeminent, and a lot of my colleagues went on to, or fellow students went on to work either in the steel industry or for things like the Royal Mint. And there was obviously 1 or 2 who went off to completely different things. But I just thought it was interesting, actually. And I really enjoyed the time at Cardiff. So it was sort of slightly by accident, I suppose. But I don't regret it since. And actually, nowadays, I mean, there's more talk about metallurgy and material science than ever, isn't there, actually? Because of the situation that we find ourselves, and that sort of criticality of some of those materials. So it's all worked out fine, actually, in the end.
It's all worked out brilliantly. And the one thing that I want to pick up on you said there is how there's a story about it around the metals, and that's something working in the industry. You sort of try and teach, particularly younger people coming through, that for us, for stainless steel, everybody is in touch with our finishes so many times a day and doesn't know about it. And we had Katie Moss on a few episodes ago, who runs Trent Refractories. I hadn't even thought about refractories, and I've been in the industry for 35 years. But of course, they're essential to all metal industries. I would have thought, particularly with foundries as well, and casting metal.
Absolutely, yeah.
And there are still a lot of foundries in the UK.
There
you
are actually.
represent over 400.
Well, there's certainly. I mean, we perhaps it might be a little bit ambitious to say there's 400 still, but there's certainly above 350 still. Admittedly, some of those are very small. I mean, we've got foundries. I mean, Rolls-Royce have a foundry making single crystal turbine blades. We've got a large foundry in England making thousands of brake discs for cars in grey cast iron every week. We've got foundries making stuff for defence, for aerospace. And then you've got the very small foundry that's more of a jobbing foundry making, say, a brass plaque for a heritage rail sector. Now, they're probably not going to join the Federation, but nonetheless, they're using they're using metallurgy, and they're certainly using casting as a process. And we also represent quite a range. We've got sand foundries, high volume or small, as we might say, jobbing foundries making small series runs or one-offs, even prototyping, taking a part from a heritage motor vehicle and then doing a reverse engineering job to manufacture a new part, right up to the companies making series and volume production for, as I say, aerospace, automotive, lots of transport systems. So, but you're right about refractories and ceramics. Yes, I mean, we're using furnaces, we're using ladles, we're using hollowware. We're using sand, we're using dyes, we're using refractories for investment casting. That world of materials, there's a lot of overlap, isn't there?
I think there really is.
Which makes it interesting, and you say it gives you some great opportunities actually as well, to sort of cross fertilize.
Completely, and it's amazing how each industry touches the life of a normal person who's not involved in any of the metal industries, just walking down the street, and they don't realise it. And there's been a lot of talk about advanced engineering, and particularly from the government, how they want to focus on advanced engineering. But you need the real everyday engineering to still be there to then move on and work more perhaps on the advanced side.
It's quite frustrating, isn't it, to talk about advanced manufacturing actually, because obviously there is some really advanced stuff, but you're not going to make a bridge out of graphene, are you? You're not going to make, if you want to stop your car, you need a brake disc, which is made of, a graphite or some sort of other similar material. We've got, they're not exciting necessarily, but they're vital things like manhole covers or pipes. Or but then you've got the other end of it, where so I mentioned Rolls-Royce, aerospace, single crystal turbine blades, but they're still using casting as the process. So yeah, I think it's a bit of a misnomer, advanced manufacturing, isn't it? Because most of us are not doing things the way we did things even 50 years ago, or even 15 years ago.
Yeah.
So we're always innovating, we're always developing, we're always honing what we do, optimizing, sustainability, competitiveness. These are vital for all sorts of reasons and all sorts of businesses, aren't they? And it's not just the high end advanced stuff that's important. And and actually some of the materials we make, the fact that we recycle them and things like that. We've got a lot to offer actually in the metal sector, I would say.
And the majority of the companies tend to be SMEs. And SMEs have to be innovative. They have to be, sustainable, because that's linked directly to making a profit, reinvesting, and surviving.
They have to be competitive at the bottom line, don't they? And actually do what the customer requires, because the customer will walk otherwise. So it's all about building those relationships, really, isn't it? And trusted relationships with your customer, but actually delivering, making sure everybody understands what you're delivering and that you can meet the objectives of the project. We all know better than I. I mean, I say I've always been in and around the world of associations and industry bodies, a bit of consultancy, R&D, in my earlier time, but rather than at the coalface. But of course, I've had the opportunity to visit lots of businesses and talk to lots of people who are absolutely involved in production.
And that's going to give you an overview, particularly of the issues or the challenges that come along and hit us over the head with a large stick, which are always something out of our control. I mean,
the left field element. Come in on a Monday, think you've got your week planned, and suddenly, okay, so that was going to be my day, and now my day is something else.
Well, I mean, the energy crisis is a massive one for manufacturing businesses, particularly those that are high energy intensive, which obviously foundries are going to be. And I know you've been trying your hardest, along with other people and other associations, to try and get the powers that be to pay some attention to this. And it's I think it's starting to move slowly in the West Midlands, that we're starting to be listened to.
I think it is. I mean, there's I think West Midlands Combined Authority, some of the other organisations in and around the West Midlands have worked really, really hard. We've got a lot of manufacturing in the West Midlands. I mean, there's manufacturing all over the country, obviously, but there's some real strengths and large companies in the West Midlands. I think certainly, without getting political, really, I think there is a bit of movement there. There is a realisation that yes, a service economy is high value and it's important, but actually a service industry has to service something.
Yes.
It doesn't exist in isolation. The services sector is there to serve. It's to provide IT, insurance, finance, all those other consultancy types of support. Now, obviously, we can offer those overseas, but actually, it's, the heart of that is going to be supporting businesses in this country, isn't it, close to home? Not least, it's the right thing to do, because we want high value jobs in this country. I don't think we can all be Deliveroo drivers or work in shops. We need to make stuff. We need to add value, don't we, at the end of the day?
And there's been a lot of talk since COVID about reshoring. Have you seen, or have your members seen, things coming back for them to produce that they may have done 20 years ago and then they disappeared overseas?
Yeah, I think there's definitely been more of a trend to that. I mean, some of that is about security of supply, isn't it? And possibly dual sourcing as well, so that you're not reliant on things on ships a long way away. That the total cost of production and manufacture and supply, as opposed to the piece part cost, which might be a lot cheaper in a different part of the world. I mean, I think, yes, there's definitely been some resurgence of interest. Of course, the challenges still remain. At the end of the day, we know that people will buy on price. And actually, if we are uncompetitive as a nation, and that, because either, we can't get to work because the trains aren't running on time, or because our energy is expensive, those are all going to have effects, aren't they? Or we haven't got enough people to work because they're all waiting on a queue to have a dentist appointment or something else, or a sort of a knee operation or something. So, there's definitely some challenges, but I'm sure that's the case. Every country has its challenges, but yeah, I think there's been some acceptance or some sort of realization of the value of manufacturing. I mean, I always remember, it's not that long ago, but at the beginning of COVID, we had letters specifically to manufacturing saying, please stay open. You are vital. Please stay open. Now, nothing has changed.
I've forgotten about that, yeah.
No, don't forget that, because it's, we were told we were vital. and that we had to stay open. Because I remember our businesses contacting us saying, well, should we stop, should we shut down? Are we allowed to work? And we had a letter, didn't we, from the Secretary of State saying, you're vital, please stay open. So we're still vital now, I would imagine, a few years on. And of course, I think this whole idea of net zero, you mentioned, we're energy intensive as an industry, as a sector. Yes, we are. Often not energy intensive enough to get some of the help that's available.
Oh, very true. Very true.
But nonetheless, using a lot of energy. But also, so our members are doing a lot on energy efficiency, heat recovery where we can. Our non-ferrous industry is still heavily reliant on natural gas. So what's going to happen there? It's slightly different with our ferrous sector because a lot of them are using electric melting already. So, they can actually, if you're given green sustainable energy, that's a sort of a zero input almost from a carbon point of view. And of course, if they are using recycled, scrap steel, for example, or recycled aluminium, which many of them are, both ferrous and non-ferrous, obviously in that case, then again, that's zero input in terms of a carbon footprint, because that metal has come in as an old engine block or a bit of old rail, where a rail has been upgraded, or a building has been taken down, a girder's come out, and that steel comes out. That comes into our foundries through processing, through the scrap supply chain, but then turns into a shiny new thing, which will then have another life, and will then have another life beyond that when it reaches the end of its life. So that circular economy a bit, I think, is really important. And to say, the more that we can make stuff close to home, the less we are being disingenuous and exporting our carbon footprint to countries where perhaps those controls aren't as tight, they haven't electrified, they're not as safe and good places to work as companies have to be in the UK. So, it's the right thing to do from a moral net zero, and also a jobs and a growth and a tax point of view, isn't it, really?
It really is. And I think one of the important things that you've raised there is just how you're supporting and understanding what your members are trying to do with regards to reducing their carbon footprint. I've been at lunches with manufacturers and they've gone, well, we can never get to net zero because we need to run the machines with power. But it's not about not running the machines. It's about how can you be more efficient? Can you save 10% efficiency on the power you use and still get the same output? Can you produce 20% of your own power through solar panels or heat pumps or something? Can you use heat transference? And say
I think you're
5%.
absolutely right. Yes.
And all those percentages will add up.
Yes, it's the every little bit, isn't it? It's a bit like the was the cycling team, wasn't it, where they were looking at every aspect, the 1%, the 2%, the 3% gains to make that sort of commercial advantage. And as I say, I go back to the fact that we're trying to electrify in this country. Electrification is going to be key, isn't it, for all of our lives. We're still using, as I say, natural gas in some of our businesses, so that is something we'll need to look at as a country. I'm slightly concerned about some of the regional aspects where we're looking in, hydrogen in certain areas, and maybe it's going to be solar or wind in another area, and a sort of regionalisation, because that is it's going to make it, where do you site your business? If your business happens to be in the wrong part of the country, that could be a bit of a disadvantage, couldn't it? If you can't, if you're having to report your carbon and you can't get it down for whatever reason. But I definitely think it's the every little bit that helps. And again, this is where obviously government's got policy's got a big role to play, hasn't it? In terms of, we've got lots of businesses who want to do things and can't, because there isn't the grid network to allow it at the moment, and they're being told it's 13 years for a connection into the grid because for their solar panels or whatever. So these are obstructions, aren't they? I think companies are more willing to do things than perhaps people realise.
I agree completely. A lot of people I talk to are really keen to advance it. They're keen to invest as well. Money, time, commitment. But what they don't want is to shoulder all of the cost with no outcome that they can see. People will take a risk, but it has to be a calculated risk. You can't, as an SME, just throw money at something that you might get an outcome.
They can see that everyone can see the direction of travel. Everybody wants to be part of it. I mean, it's sort of, it makes common sense from a business point of view if you can save energy. But if you can also reduce your carbon footprint, then that's a competitive advantage, and that's going to cost you money not doing that in the years to come, isn't it? With all the carbon reporting that we're facing now. So, yeah, I think people are very willing, but there's some structural changes, aren't there? I mean, someone used the example that the grid was set up to put in a coal-fired station every sort of 30 years or so, and now there's a grid connection being asked for every week. It's a different problem. It's a different infrastructure. So that side of, our infrastructure has to evolve as well, doesn't it? Alongside it. So, but I say from our side, yes, you're absolutely right. We're very aware of it. We set up a net zero panel a couple of years back to address these very things. We're not one of the biggest trade associations in terms of lobbying and things like that, but certainly we are actively engaged when we need to be. And try and represent the sector as well as we can.
One of the things I always think about when I think about the Cast Metals Federation is you have a reputation. The business that you're in obviously is steeped in history, and one post will be in a gorgeous building with a really long history in manufacturing, and the next you're talking about robotics. So you sort of really combine the years of history and respect that, but also look forward with innovation. And anyone who's listened to a few of these podcasts know I want a robot. So looking at what trends do you think will continue with the innovation that your members are doing? Where are they sort of going to strive to go forwards in the future?
Well, I think you're absolutely right about robotics and automation. Again, a lot of this boils down to competitiveness at the end of the day, doesn't it? But we have challenges getting skills, and I think automation can help with some of that. So you can make the jobs that you do have more exciting and more interesting, and have more technicians involved than people. We don't have people shoveling sand really anymore, like we might have had 150 years ago. And I think there's a lot of the looking at the materials that we use. The IT in foundries now around metrology, around simulation, around optimization and honing of tooling. We're using additive manufacturing a lot now, whether that's in core making or whether it's in tooling or whether it's cladding for tooling to give it a longer life. There's lots happening on that side of things as well. So it's been a really interesting few years, and I think the next few years will be really interesting. And you're absolutely right. I think we've certainly tried as a trade association to be open and keep our ears open and our eyes open. It's sometimes hard to know. There's so much going on. It's hard to know where to put your effort, but or even to be in the room, to know the room exists, let alone know where the room is and how you can get in it. But I think we're now getting a lot of transforming foundation industries is an example where we've engaged with that, recognizing that we're an important part of the metal sector, an important part of the circular economy for metals, but have a lot of common issues around energy, heat recovery, competitiveness generally, skills, all those sort of things that are going to be that are across all of those sectors. So yes, we've certainly tried to be open to engaging with those forums, not be frightened about them, because I think some businesses can be intimidated and actually think, I think, and there are, academics can be a little bit ivory tower, but they're measured by different things. Their job is to write papers and get research funding, and that's how a measure of success. There's some intermediate organisations now, aren't there, that are working to bridge that, to that gap. And of course, we're on the industry side of things. So trying to sort of talk to people and engage and convince our members that it's not all ivory towers and high blown research. Some of this is really practical solutions, because the chemists and the construction people, the civil engineers understand some of the things that that we're facing, and may bring some fresh thinking and some new ideas and some cross fertilization. So yeah, I think anything around competitiveness, sustainability, better use of materials, heat recovery, energy efficiency. These are massive topics.
They really are. We've worked,
but they're really interesting as well. They're really interesting, actually, as well, aren't they?
They are. They're fascinating, and we've hosted academics here from several universities: Birmingham, Aston, and Swansea. And I'm probably forgetting one, so apologies if I am. And just having them on site and hearing their questions. They ask different type of questions.
And they really
which makes you think about it differently.
Exactly. And also the other way around is they will be thinking that they know what it's like to do X, Y, Z, whether it's some sort of processing or whatever. But actually sort of saying, well, why don't you do this? Well, have you seen the building we're in? Retrofitting of this is not possible. Our heat is low grade and it's in the wrong place. So we can't retrofit. Or the guy's got to get in because he's got to access this, that, and the other. So, there's nothing like the walk around, is there, and the conversation. But I absolutely agree. You're absolutely right to get people in, because you learn as well, don't you, from people coming in?
It's great fun working questions on that collaboration. It really is. Yeah. Although my favourite was, we had a team of academics here, and I'm not going to say which university, for a couple of days, and we were measuring the heat that was produced through different polishing processes. What was retained in, it was all stainless steel. We were testing what was retained in the stainless steel, what was being extracted through the extraction system, the LEV, local exhaust ventilation. And what was sort of a miasma in the air. We were measuring all of that. And one of them came up and he said, I want to test a different machine. I went, yeah, okay, which one? And he went, well, he said, it's a polishing machine. And I went, I've got 3 factories. They are all full with polishing machines. That's all we do. Which one? Come and show me. And his colleagues were in hysterics, but he was just like, 100%, I know what I'm talking about. It's a polishing machine. And I was like, if you'd said laser cutter, I'd have probably been a bit surprised, but
Yeah, it is. Well, I say, how would you know unless you've been it and seen it and done it? We all of us, we don't know what we don't know, do we? So,
exactly.
I think, don't be frightened to ask the daft question.
Yeah, we love a daft question. It, really? It's not. There is no daft question. There's just how you're giving the answer. But talking about collaboration between industry and academics and industry together, September this year is the 3rd UK Metals Expo. And obviously CMF have been involved in the last 2. The UK Metals Expo is supported by the UK Metals Council, and you're a director on there. What stood out for you for the last 2 years of the Expo?
I think it's been a really positive experience, actually. I think having a focus on metals up and down the whole of the up and down the supply chain of metals, I think has been good. I think there's a tendency with a lot of shows to get quite dilute and watered down, and to be sort of taken over by different things. Whereas the beauty of the metals show has been, it's really been around metals per se, and we've gone there not necessarily expecting to get a lot of people coming in looking for castings per se, but we have, which has been really positive. We weren't necessarily expecting, a lot of end users and buyers to come, but say we've had a lot of inquiries, which we've been able to sort of pass on, and we've, direct them to our website where there's a search facility and things like that. And of course, that's our be all and end all. We want to get business into our foundries. But I think the other side of it has been the odd conversations, the people who've come over and inquired about something. And as you say, some of them have been quite daft, and they're saying, oh, we want this part. We think it's a high pressure die casting. We want 10 off. and you go, well, okay, so the tooling's 150 grand, so maybe high pressure die casting is not the method for you, because but again, it's all about that education piece, isn't it, as well, and having that conversation. And I say it's around the other conversations you have with. I mean, you obviously get people coming to sell to you when you're at shows, and some of that can be annoying, but some of it can be actually quite informative, because you do literally have something that you wouldn't have expected. You would never have thought it was relevant, and it could lead into something. So I think having one place where people can come, and to say have conversations, even with other trade associations, even with other businesses, even with other foundries and suppliers that are there, having it all in a couple of days. You can do a lot of business in a couple of days, can't you? That you would take you weeks to do if you weren't in one place.
I was talking to one of the exhibitors last year, he's one of our key accounts, and it was great to be able to spend a couple of days with their directors who were there in a more relaxed sort of atmosphere. And they said something that I thought was really quite interesting about how the UK Metals Expo was being perceived. And they said it's actually not about getting new customers and selling. It's about flying the flag for the metals industry, having cautious conversations with competitors, talking to other stakeholders and partners or potential new contacts, because we all need each other and we all need to support each other at something like this.
Well, that's what I completely agree. I think that's what I say. We didn't necessarily think we were going to be getting lots of inquiries for castings. We had more than we were perhaps expecting. But I think, as you say, that raising the profile, there was a few years ago, we were through the Metals Council and its precursor, we were looking at, it was the time when strategic strategies were all the rage.
Yes.
And everyone was going to have a strategy for their sector, which was going to be transformative. It didn't quite happen like that, but that was the ambition at the time for about 5 minutes. But when we looked through a lot of those strategic reports, the thing that stood out was they didn't mention metals. They didn't mention how these things were going to be made and what they were going to be made of. It was all about automotive, aerospace, defence, all these sort of things. There was a strategy for everything. And the obvious thing that was missing was some of these raw materials, metals being one of them. So that's what sort of galvanised us to come together and do a report back in the day. And then we did, obviously, last year at the Metals Expo, we published our then State of the Metal Sector report.
Yes.
And again, they're not on their own. It's a document. It gets published, but there were some key messages there that everybody can stand on and talk about and be consistent on. Some key areas around things like energy and skills and sustainability and various things like that are common to all of us, but we can all stand on the same platform and say, yes, that's the problem, and that's the thing that we want to work on together. I mean, we're a very diverse. I was going to say disparate. I don't know if that's the right word, but we're quite a lot of SMEs. And even the trade associations vary, don't they? With some big ones that very much focus on the lobbying and the policy side of things with big members, to others like ourselves and others who are very much down the food chain. We're sort of tier 2, 3, 4, in the supply chain. So getting that all together remains a challenge. I don't think we've cracked it yet by any stretch, but at least through the expo we have a recognition that metals are important, and actually these messages around recyclability of metals last forever, metals recycle forever. I think the metals industry has a bright future in that respect because it is so recyclable as a material.
It is. And when we're talking about not just sustainability but reducing consumption, and that's quite difficult in a Western capitalist society, but we're of a similar age. So if we think back to the first sort of washing machine we had, I had a twin tub, and it had been my friend's, and it had been their aunt's, and it was probably 20 years old when I got it. And then I had a front loader and I gave that twin tub to somebody else. That damn machine is still somewhere working.
Yeah, exactly.
But within 2 years, my front loader had to have a new motor, and then it had to have a new drum. And we've got to the stage where we build things to be replaced. And it's difficult, isn't it, to find the balance?
Built-in obsolescence now, built-in obsolescence, isn't it? And I think there is a bit of an acceptance that isn't, isn't the way forward. I mean, a mobile phone, you were expected to, to change your mobile phone every couple of years. You were expected to change your computer every few years. That's completely unrealistic, isn't it, in the modern world? But as you say, we've got to be able to repair and recycle stuff. Like you, I had a pram, I think, that had been through several children before it got to ours, and then went on somewhere else. But now people want a new one. Why? What's wrong with one that's been second hand?
I had a new one. But no one else I knew had kids.
Yeah. Well, as I say, it is obviously horses for courses, and everyone's got their own. But I mean, we've allowed things, things like vaping and mobile phones and disposable cups and takeaway foods. We've enabled things, haven't we? We've walked blindly into
we
a lot
have
of
completely.
this, and now the next generation are really paying a price for it. The amount of pollution that we've got and the amount of microplastics and things like that. But I say, coming back to metals, I think we've got metals that can be part of the solution. I think we could argue that metals can be lower carbon products compared with things made with other materials, just because of that. If we can get green energy making these parts and processing it, and then we're using recycled metal that goes round and round again and will be used again, that ought to be a really positive thing.
Definitely.
For our sector, but also for people coming into the sector, looking at for jobs that are going to be hopefully rewarding. I mean, we've all had a great time. I had some great opportunities. I mean, there's been some low points, but generally it's been a really positive. The people I've met, the opportunities I've had. But as I say, I think that positive thing for youngsters, tomorrow's engineers and technicians coming in, they don't need to be embarrassed about working in the metals industry. They
can make a real difference.
They can be positive about it, yeah, exactly, and be proud of it, actually.
I could carry on talking to you all day, but we're over time. I've done this a few times recently. So last question, Pam. What's the best advice you've ever received?
Good question. I was thinking about this. There's a few things I would say. So probably more than one, unfortunately, which probably doesn't help you on your timescale. But, keep your sense of humour, I would think, and not be. There's a good expression, I can't remember exactly, but it's sort of perfection is the enemy of whatever it is. But basically, just delivering something is better than it being perfect. And there's nothing, and also good communication. If you're going to be late with something, let people know. Communicate, keep in touch with people, because I think that's absolutely key. But I suppose fundamentally, don't lose your sense of humour, because you're going to need it.
You are. I think we all are as the years go on. Thank you so much for taking the time, Pam,
no worries,
to talk to me. I really appreciate it.
I really enjoyed it. Thanks then. Bye-bye.